everyone. Okay, let's do that. I was inspired by your stories. Everybody stand up. Stand up straight. You've been sitting for a minute. Everybody stand up. There you go. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do two things to kick off. We are going to make some noise, and then you're going to share some love with each other, okay? So what we're going to do is, see, everybody got nervous when I said share love. It's cool. It's cool. What we're going to do is I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and I want you to scream or shout blueberries as loud as you can, because I absolutely love that story. Then, when you're done, I want you to give somebody a high five and say welcome. So those are our two tasks. So let's do the blueberries things. Ready? I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then you're on. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Blueberries! Love it. Now give somebody a high five and say welcome. Awesome. Are you feeling the love? Man, I'm feeling the love all the way up here. That's great. Super excited to be with you today and tomorrow. I have two goals. Two goals in my time with you today and tomorrow. Number one, I want to encourage you. Number two, I want to equip you. That's all I want to do. I want to encourage you and I want to equip you. So this morning, the keynote will be about encouraging you. And then after I give the keynote this morning, later this afternoon, and into the next day, tomorrow, I will equip you. And out of all the things that I do as a psychologist, working with educators is absolutely the sprinkles on my cupcake. So I'm so excited about it. So encourage you. That's the task first. I'm going to start by sharing with you a story. Something happened to me on Monday, August 25th, 2008. It was a day that was so significant for me, it literally changed the course of my career. That day, Monday, August 25th, 2008, was my first day ever in my life as a real, live substitute teacher. Now, since I'm a licensed psychologist, I know the best way to heal from a traumatic event like that is to talk about it. And there's so much I could tell you about what a train wreck that day was, but I'll give you some of the lowlights. I remember I was on my campus at 7 a.m. that morning, and I was fired up, man. I was going to make a difference. I was going to change kids' lives. I could feel it in my bones, right? And it was an elementary school campus in Bryan, Texas. It was a Title I school. My kids went to elementary there. They knew me. I knew them. My kids were in a dual language program there. So I knew them. They knew me. And so I walk in the front door, and I'm handing the receptionist my name badge, or my ID, so she can make my name badge. And she said, "Good morning, Dr. Saenz. I didn't know we have professional development today." And I said, "No, ma'am, we don't. I'm actually here to substitute teach." And she looked at me kind of funny. She said, "Really?" And I said, "Oh, yes, ma'am, really." And so I hand her my ID, and she swipes it. And so as she's giving me my name badge, she says, "Well, whose class are you going to be in today?" And I forgot the teacher's name. It was a third grade teacher. I remember that. I said, "Miss Smith, third grade." Well, as she's handing me my ID, she says, "Good luck with that." I said, "Oh my gosh, the haters are going to hate, right? But I'm here to make a difference, right? I'm not going to buy into the negativity, right?" So I go to my classroom, 7:45, the kids showed up. It was absolute madness, man. It was chaos. So this was the first Monday back at school. They were there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They had the weekend off. This was their first Monday back. Well, what I didn't know was that for whatever reason, the teacher had come in the weekend before and rearranged all the desks, right? Yeah, so the kids come in and they're all confused and they're thinking, wait, on Friday the desks all look like this. Today's Monday, all the desks are like this. On Friday, my teacher was a Caucasian female. Today I got this guy, right? They weren't even sure they were in the right class. The kids were running and screaming and jumping, and I freaked out. I just freaked out. Like, if you've ever jumped into a cold swimming pool and you're like, right? You can't breathe. I had that moment, right? And so I'm panicking, and I'm thinking, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And so I'm thinking, oh, hold on, Adam, you got this, right? You're a school psychologist, right? So my first thought was behavior intervention. You need a behavior intervention, right? So then my second thought was research-based behavior intervention, right? You know, don't want the RTI police to take me away. So I'm thinking like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And then, bing, the light bulb goes off. I said, aha, I got it. Like my friend says, this ain't rocket surgery, right? Everybody knows if you've got a room of rowdy, inner-city, third-grade kids, all you have to do to put the fear of God in them, you just write their name on the board, right? So that was going to be my Tier 1 research-based intervention, right? Write kids' names on the board. And I said, oh, but I know not everybody's going to respond to Tier 1. So you know what? For those kids who don't have the fear of God put in them, when I write their name on the board, you know what Tier 2 is going to be? Check mark. Oh, yeah, baby. Oh, I'm not messing around, right? So this kid, he threw a book across the room. I said, son, what are you doing? You just threw a book across the room. Yes, I saw you do it. You did too. Yeah, you did. Stop lying. You did too. Look, I'm not going to stand here and argue. Yes, you did too. I saw you do it. Stop lying. I said, son, that's done with you. I'm going to write your name up here. What's your name? What is your name? All right. Say, hey, your little friend over there. What's his name? What is his name? What's your name, son? I'm going to write your name up here. I'm not messing around, right? And it was just stupid stuff like that all day. It was a master's workshop in how not to lead a classroom, right? 12 hours after I stepped foot in that classroom, a bell rang. Finally time for lunch. I said, are you kidding me? How is it only 11:15, right? So I'm trying to make this big dramatic point to the kids about how bad their behavior was and how disappointed the teacher was going to be. I said, you know, it's really sad. I said, in 10 minutes, we're about to go to lunch. And I said, let me check. I turn around, I start counting names on the board. Da, 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 da. I said, 28 of you are going to be stuck in here with me at recess. This little girl in the back of the classroom, she raised her hand. Sir, there are only 22 kids in this classroom. Do you want to check mark, little girl? What's your name? I'm not messing around. What's your name? Right? So the bell rings, the kids go to lunch. Man, I grabbed Starbucks, I grabbed my bologna sandwich, I walked down to the teacher's lounge. I was a shell of a man at 11:15. I plopped myself down at the first table I could find. Teacher's lounge was empty, right? And so this teacher walked in, and she was actually my kid's kindergarten teacher, like a brilliant educator, Jedi Knight teacher, right? And she knew me and I knew her, but she wasn't expecting to see me there. So she walks in and she stopped and she looked at me, right? And she sees me sitting there with my bologna sandwich and my Starbucks and PTSD written across my forehead, right? And I could tell it kind of freaked her out, you know? She's like, oh, okay. And then in this very sweet kindergarten teacher kind of way, she walked over and just very gently she put her hand on the table and she said, Dr. Saenz, is there anything I can do to help you? Right? And I looked at her and I thought about it for a minute. I said, yes, ma'am, actually there is. I said, listen, I know you don't know me that well, but I'm going to ask you a question and I just need you to give me an honest answer. And she said, okay, I can do that. I said, great. I said, ma'am, where on this campus do y'all keep the red wine? And that's what she did. She laughed. Oh, you're so funny, doctor. I said, sister, I'm not joking. I need a drink. Really, where do y'all keep it? And she wouldn't give it up. 2 seconds after I sat down with my bologna sandwich, another bell rang. Time to go back to class. And I regressed, man, on my way back to the classroom. I was like, oh, I have not cried in a public school since 1976, man, but I'm about to lose it. This sucks. I want to go home, right? So I get back to my classroom, we make it through the afternoon, and finally the last bell rings and all the kids are shuffling out. And man, sure enough, the last kid to leave the classroom was the one that had been riding me hardest all day long. Him and his little compadres back there in the corner, man. Their goal was to break me down. His name was on the board. He had a check mark. He had a hashtag. He had an exclamation point. I think at one point I gave him a pentagram, and I was just so done with this kid, right? It looked like his name and a blotted out profanity right next to it, right? So he's walking out, you know, right? He gets to the door and he stops and he turns and he looks at me. He says, hey, Dr. Saenz, you're pretty cool, man. You going to be my teacher again tomorrow? Dude, I looked that kid straight in the eye. I said, oh, dear God, I hope not, right? So he left, and then the teacher from across the hall came over. She had been checking on me throughout the day to make sure I still had a pulse, right? And she comes in and she says, Adam, how did it go? And I said, you know what? I don't think it went that well. And she said, really? And I said, yes, ma'am, really? And she said, let me ask you some questions. She said, how many fights did you have to break up today? I said, well, none. She said, all right. She said, how many kids did you have to chase across the railroad tracks today? And I said, well, none. And she said, you had a great day. What are you talking about? So, I got home that night. I found my wine. And that saying that a picture's worth 1,000 words. A couple days later, I think it was my daughter that texted me this picture. And I thought, oh my gosh, this picture captures my first day as a substitute teacher. That's it, man. That's it. I'm that guy, that one right in the middle. That's me. And that dog on top is that third grade class just squatting the collective rear end of their bad behavior on my skills, right? This dude's going to come in here giving names and check marks, thinks he's going to change the world. Take that, right? That was it, man. So, so people that know me, I'm from College Station, Texas, and people that know me there say, Adam, I don't get it, man. Why are you substitute teaching, right? You've got 2 doctorate degrees, you've got Ivy League training. Why are you substitute teaching, for crying out loud? And I'll tell you why I started. It really all started back in 2001, which was my first year as a school psychologist. I was right out of graduate school, ready to change the world. And part of what I did was this thing called consultation, right? And that is, Adam, these are kids. We've tried everything. Nothing's worked. We need you to come in and observe and consult and give us recommendations. What do we need to do to be academically and behaviorally successful? So I would do that, K through 12. I'd go to campuses. I would observe kids. I would look in the classroom and watch them in transition areas everywhere. I would give them tests. I would talk to parents and interview teachers, all that. We'd come back to a staffing. We'd sit down at a little table like this, and I would hand out my report to everyone. And I would say, just open up to the last page, let's look at my recommendations, right? And say, number 1, if we're going to be successful with the student, we need to, number 1, da-da-da-da-da. Number 2, number 3, I'd read through my recommendations, right? And that's when I would get the look, right? And you didn't have to be Sigmund Freud to figure out what the look was saying, okay? And I just realized, they were looking at me like I was an idiot. Like, what? You expect me to do what with this kid in my classroom, And I thought, that's weird, because in theory, this is what we're supposed to be doing, but I'm not getting buy-in from teachers or administrators. I don't know. Well, maybe it's just because I'm a first-year school psychologist. I don't know what I'm doing. Who knows? Well, that goes on my whole first year. I'm giving recommendations, and I get the look, Into my second year, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm no good, right? Well, into my second year, I was working with this one high school teacher who was, let's just say she was very comfortable speaking her mind. I'll put it that way, right? So she's got this kid in her class, tried everything, nothing's worked. Adam, come in, do your consultation, give us recommendations, right? So I do my thing, and we end up back at a meeting, me and the teacher and the assistant principal and special ed counselor or something like that. And I say, all right, my friends, if we're going to be successful with this kid, this is what we need to do. Open up some recommendations. Number 1, Well, as I'm reading through my recommendations, I could feel this woman, her eyes were burning a hole in my forehead right here, man. In Spanish, we call it mal de ojo, right? It's just like you're getting the evil eye, the stink eye, right? And I could feel the negative energy, and I thought, this is weird, this is awkward. When I'm done, I'm out of here, right? So I read through my recommendations. I get the look in her evil eye, and so I'm getting up to leave because it was weird. Well, I didn't realize that I was the only person that was presenting at that meeting, so everybody got up and went to the door, and they bottlenecked at the door, and I got stuck in the back of the pack. And my teacher friend stayed there, just looking at me, right? And I thought, I just want to get out of here. Well, as soon as I got to the door, it was just me and her in the room. I put my hand on the doorknob, and right then she said, Dr. Saenz, can I talk? I said, oh, crud. Okay, here we go. Yes, ma'am, how can I help you? And she said, I just have a question for you. And I don't know how, but as soon as she said, I have a question for you, I knew exactly what she was going to ask me, and I had my answer ready. And I said, yes, ma'am, what's your question? And she said, let me ask you, have you ever taught before in your life? Right? And like I said, I don't know how she was going to ask that, but I had my answer ready. I said, yes, ma'am, I taught graduate statistics at Texas A&M University. Oh, son, wrong answer, wrong answer. And she said, let me be specific, Dr. Saenz, have you ever in your life taught K through 12? I said, no, ma'am, I haven't. Man, she got her stuff, she put it together, put it in her backpack, and she said, huh, that's what I thought. Got up, turned around, walked out, right? So my first thought was, what an incredibly bitter little lady you are. Oh my gosh. It must suck to work with you. But I get to leave this campus, so I'm not going to worry about it, right? Well, you know, in the days that followed, after I got over my wounded ego, I thought, like, you know what, Adam? Not only is that a fair question, that's an essential question for a guy like you who's going around telling teachers how to do their job, you know? And I started wondering, like, what if I'm that guy, you know, the ivory tower academic that knows everything in theory about what we're supposed to be doing in classroom, but has no clue what it's like to be in the classroom, right? Because I've never taught. My undergraduate degree was in English, and I went straight into psychology. So I said, you know what, man, I'm too old to go back to school and change my major to teach. The closest I'm going to get to that is to sub. That's why I started substitute teaching back then in 2008. I still substitute teach now, and I coach high school track and field because I wanted just a taste of what it's like to be in a classroom to see if my classroom experience in any way changed the recommendations that I make. And I'll tell you, all these years later of subbing and coaching, it hasn't. I still make the same recommendations. In fact, I believe in them even more passionately than I ever did. But here's what changed. After that very first day of substitute teaching, the first light bulb that went off for me was this. Hey, Adam, guess what, big guy? It doesn't matter how many degrees you have. It doesn't matter where you got them from. It doesn't matter what you think you know about education. Unless you've actually taught in a classroom, unless you've actually done the work day in, day out, day in, day out, there is no way you will ever understand or appreciate how incredibly demanding that role is, right? It was a huge insight for me. It reminded me of a t-shirt I saw one time that said, "Those who can teach, and those who can't make laws for those who teach," right? I was that guy. I was that guy being that person, right? What happened is that I was overwhelmed with a sense of admiration, right? Like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? That role is incredibly demanding, and yet there are men and women just like you across the country, and I'm talking about from down to PPCD all the way through high school and beyond that are doing an amazing job. Overwhelmed with admiration. And then what happened was that feeling of admiration shifted to one of curiosity. And I got really curious and I thought, man, how do you get good at that, right? That thing called being a classroom teacher. Number one, and number two, how do you get good at it and stay good at it when data show that about half the teachers working in schools now will be employed in another profession in 5 years? So I was really curious, you know, how do you get good at it? How do you stay good at it? And I thought, man, I'm not qualified to answer that. I've never taught. I don't know anything about curriculum and instruction. I'm not an educational leadership guy. I've never been an administrator. I mean, I'm a psychologist, right? That's not my area. So I felt kind of frustrated. Like, I'm really curious about this, but I'm not qualified to answer. So then I started thinking about, you know, after several months of just toying with the idea and tossing concepts around, I thought, well, hold on, Adam. You've got a PhD in psychology. You're a licensed psychologist. You've got a doctorate of ministry in pastoral counseling. You're ordained clergy. That's your angle. Why don't you investigate the psychological variables that drive vocational satisfaction, number one, and number two, why don't you investigate the spiritual or existential variables that drive vocational satisfaction, and then distill that to the world of an educator. And then I got excited. I thought, I'm actually qualified. I have a license, I'm a licensed psychologist, and I'm an ordained minister. So I started doing research in 2008, 2009, 2010, looking at those two variables. What is it psychologically that makes us excel and sustainable in what we do? And then what is it spiritually or existentially that makes us excel and be sustainable in what we do? And basically what I found is this: no matter what I do, whether I'm a banker, plumber, lawyer, welder, trade, whatever I do, if I'm going to do it well, number one, and number two, be sustainable in that thing, two things have to be true of me. Number one, I have to understand that what I'm doing, it's not just a job. A job is just a basic agreement to swap labor for a paycheck. I also have to understand that what I'm doing, it's not just a career. A career is just a job with advancement opportunities. But if I'm going to do what I do well and do it sustainably, there has to be some sense of calling for me. And that's not what I'm doing, not where, not when, not how, but why. That's the why of my role, right? And it's so important. Here's how it works out in the life of the average classroom teacher. Let me ask you, are there any first-year teachers in the house? Raise your hand real raw. Oh, give them a hand. Show them some love. Yeah. First-year teachers. Welcome to the family. Suckers. You know how I can tell a first-year teacher on the first day of school? It's so obvious. Her hair is perfect. Her makeup is perfect. Her outfit is cute, and she's teaching kids like her hair is on fire, right? If you're lucky, first-year teacher, if you are lucky, you will make it to the first week of October. You look at your watch and you say, oh, good Lord, is it Thanksgiving yet, right? Thanksgiving rolls around, you sit down at the Thanksgiving table and you say these words. I can't figure out why. I can't stop eating. 5 days, 7 pounds later, you go back to your campus. You say, I got just enough juice in me to get me to winter break. Winter break rolls around, you get off work on Friday, and you think back to Thanksgiving, and you say, oh my gosh, I overate at Thanksgiving. I am not going to overeat again. I'm going to drink. First thing you do when you walk in the door, open a bottle of wine, you pour yourself a glass of wine. Wait, did I say bottle of wine? Girlfriend, you are a first-year teacher with $60,000 worth of student loan debt. You can't afford a bottle of wine. You're going to sit down and twist the cap off of 40 of Mickey's. That's what you're going to do. Cold busted. So it's you, Mickey's in a brown paper bag, box of tissues, remote control, and 2 weeks of the Lifetime Network. January rolls around, you awaken out of a drunken stupor, and you say, oh, I got just enough juice in me to get me to spring break. Well, the time spring break rolls around, you get off work on Friday, you say, I'm too tired to eat, I'm too tired to drink, all I want to do is sleep. I know what I'll do, I'll kick off my spring break with a 10-minute nap. You lay down for your 10-minute nap, and the next thing you know, your alarm clock is going off. You're late for work 10 days later. You slept through spring break. You wake up in a panic, you look in the mirror and you say, hair, makeup, ain't nobody got time for that. Oh no, ma'am. You show up to work now, you're wearing sweatpants and a pair of chanclas, for crying out loud, right? You say, I got just enough juice in me to get me through that date with Destiny in April when my kids take that test, right? Well, by the time May rolls around, you're in full-blown zombie mode. You're not even speaking in complete sentences anymore. You're just walking around like that. You got a little trickle of blood out of the corner of your mouth. What is that blood? It's that student. You tried everything and nothing worked. I finally just ate him, man. I didn't know what else to do, right? Now you're showing up to work in curlers and a moo-moo, for crying out loud. My, how far you have fallen from grace. Well, the only thing that's going to snap you out of zombie mode is that you're going to walk into the teacher's lounge and you're going to look into your mailbox, and you're going to see a little letter, and it's going to say, you know, South Bend School Corp or whatever, and it's going to have your name on it, and you're going to read it, and then you're going to rub your eyes like that and read it. Oh my God, I can't believe this. Ha! They renewed my contract, right? I didn't get fired. I got a job. So year 2, you show up and you're all excited. You're rocking, you're rolling. Year 3, you take on more responsibilities. You know the kids. You know your curriculum. You know the lesson plans. You know the parents. You know your colleagues. You're doing great. Year 4, you're department chair, whatever. Well, right around year 5 or year 6, you have what I call the Dunkin' Donuts moment, right? So back in my day, there was this old Dunkin' Donuts commercial. I don't know if y'all remember that, but this guy would wake up at some ungodly hour, and what would he say? Time to make the donuts, right? And it's just this idea like, oh, dude, I'm not feeling it today. I don't want to be here, right? And I'll tell you, when we have our Dunkin' Donuts moments down in Texas, it will happen. The clock started a week ago, and it will run through the second week of February. And what happens in Texas, if you live south of I-20 in Dallas, you will see that the temperature plummets to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Which is apocalyptic by Texas standards, right? So you see that magic number 28 and you start praying in Jesus' holy name for a snow day, right? Oh, make it happen in Jesus' name, right? In Jesus' name. Like my mom would say, "Aprenda la vela," man, you light a candle, you do whatever your thing calls for, right? So you go home and you're praying for your snow day in Jesus' name. First thing you do is turn on the Weather Channel and you start looking at all the districts that are being canceled. And you're thinking, oh, come on, lucky 7, baby, make it happen. Jesus. Promise I'll read my Bible more. So then you're going and you're going and you're going, and we're in College Station, right? So Dallas ISD closed, yeah. Austin ISD closed, yeah. But not College Station ISD. Oh, no, 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 right? So you wake up the next day, it's 28 degrees, it's bone dry, not even a little like, in Texas, if we see like a little drip of ice on a snow, hey, shut it down, man, right? Like this is dangerous, right? Not even that. So you go to school and you pull up into your car in the parking lot, and you're in your car, and that's when you have your Dunkin' Donuts moment, right? And you stop and you say, oh, I don't want to be here, right? They're not paying me enough for this, and I didn't sleep well last night, but that kid that's running circles around me, he slept like a baby, and he's going to be loaded for bear. And then you get frustrated, and then I'm going to get my real estate license. They can take this job, and right? Desperate times call for desperate measures, right? And then you get to this ever important question. Why? Man, why am I doing this? All the blood, all the sweat, all the tears, everything I have to put up with, right? Why? That's the teachable question right there, is why. That's finally we get to an important question. And so I could say, you know what? My why was, I remember back when I was searching for my calling. This why is, who am I and why am I on this planet? And I remember when I did that work, I remember this is who I am and the reason I'm on this planet. My why is in that building, right? That's my why. And those in a house where I'm selling real estate, they're not going to be in the corporate world where I climb a corporate ladder. They're going to be in that building. And I could bail and go do something else, but that's my why. It's those kids in there, and it's not going to, anything else won't satisfy my soul. So that's it. Number one, it can't just be a job. It can't just be a career. There has to be some sense of calling, right? That's finding my why. Not what am I doing, not where, not how, but when, but why. And the bottom line is that my why has to be compelling enough to sustain me through that. Number one. So if I'm going to do what I do well and do it sustainably, no matter what I do, it can't just be a job. It can't just be a career. There has to be some sense of calling. Here's the second thing that has to be true. I don't find satisfaction in my calling. I don't find satisfaction in my calling. Instead, I find satisfaction in the totality of my life, and I take satisfaction to my calling. So let me explain what I mean by that, this idea that I'm not finding satisfaction in my calling, but taking satisfaction to my calling. Another way to say that is I'm practicing self-care. Right? So we can think of our lives as a wheel. Each spoke represents a major area. If I'm taking care of myself and finding satisfaction in my life, that's what my life looks like. That's my life wheel. That's me living my A game. So I'm being a good steward of my finances and my spirit, my body, my occupation, and my emotions, right? And when I'm taking care of myself, I'm much more resilient to stress. Right? But when I'm not taking care of myself, I'm the red wheel, and that's my C- game. And when I'm living my C- game, I'm much more vulnerable to stress, meaning it takes less and less stress to wear me out. And what I know as a psychologist is that those two wheels represent two completely different people. If I'm the green wheel, my cup is always half full, and if I'm the red wheel, my cup is always half empty. So the red wheel people that aren't taking care of themselves, I call them the Eeyores of life, right? From Winnie the Pooh, they are life suckers. That's the person that you give them a $100 bill and they're going to say, great, now I have to go to the bank to get change. I'm probably going to have a flat tire on the way to the bank, and when I get out to change my flat, I'm going to get hit by a truck and I'm going to get killed. So thank you for this $100 death certificate you just gave me, right? Life suckers, man. Nobody wants to be around a life sucker. Raise your hand if you know a life sucker. Does anybody know Yeah, you do. Put your hands down. Raise your hand now if they're sitting right next to you. Anybody? We got life suckers in the house, man. Get them out of here. Nobody wants to be around a life sucker, right? Now, if I'm the green wheel, my cup is half full, right? And I'm a life giver. And I say, and I show up to my campus saying, I'm good, I'm taking care of myself. What's the problem and how can I be part of a solution? Instead of, what's the problem and how can I put it on steroids by attacking, blaming, criticizing, condemning, rationalizing, denying, minimizing, and all that other, defense mechanism, psychological nonsense that goes on when we get to our dark selves, right? Everybody wants to be a life giver, right? And so being a life giver is awesome. Now, it will deplete me, absolutely. Being a life giver will take the energy out of me, but here's the deal. It's just like my iPhone. When it gets to the red 20%, that means you better plug me in and charge me up, because if I get down to zero, I'm not going to be any good to anyone. Well, being a life giver is about understanding that we have a check engine light in our lives that tells us you need to pull over and look under the hood and take care of yourself. And so what makes excellence sustainable is honoring that rhythm of saying, I'm going to fill myself up, I'm going to be poured out. I'm going to fill myself back up, I'm going to be poured out. I'm going to fill myself back up, and I'm going to be poured out. And my wife is an occupational therapist. She works for Bryan independent school district. We've been special ed people since 2000, right? And we've learned to honor the rhythm of the school year. So we're filled up in summer, poured out, and then filled back up over, Thanksgiving break, winter break, and then we're poured back out. And so we've learned to recognize that's sustainable. We're filled up and poured out versus I'm going to go in there, complain, attack, blame, criticize. It's horrible, right? So out of that research, I ended up writing the book, The Power of a Teacher. If I'm an educator, how do I do those things? How do I link what I value deeply with what I do on a day-to-day basis? Calling, right? And then number two, how do I take care of myself? And I'll be talking a lot more about that actually tomorrow. So I wrote that book in 2012, and then the more I started working in schools, the more I began to realize how incredibly relational good instruction is. It starts with relationships, right? And I was really just struck by that. And so the next book I wrote was called Relationships That Work. And I wrote that with one of my colleagues in clinical practice when we started asking, what are the 4 most common things that need to be in place for any relationship to have any hope of surviving, right? Or not just surviving, but prospering. Then most recently, now, after I wrote that book, then the more and more we work in schools, we're realizing it's not just relationships, it's about SEL, it's about emotional intelligence, because that's what allows me to have the relationships that allows learning to happen. So this book now that just was released a couple of days ago is the EQ intervention. So I told you that my goal, 2 goals in my time with you today and tomorrow. Number 1, I want to encourage you, and number 2, I want to equip you. I'm going to do a lot of equipping work later this afternoon and tomorrow when I do my workshops. We're going to be talking about emotional intelligence, SEL. We're going to be talking about how do I apply SEL for my life. We're going to be talking about our wellness wheel. How do I maintain wellness in my life as an educator? All that's going to happen later. So what I'm going to do now to shift and really focus on the encouraging piece is I'm going to share 2 case studies with you. And I think these case studies will do more to encourage you than me talking through data and research or anything else. So here, let me show you these 2 kids. These are real kids. I actually have parental consent, so they're real stories. The boy on the left is a 6th grade boy. His name is Lou. The girl on the right is a 4th grader. Her name is Maya. And as I talk through these 2 kids, there are 2 questions I'm going to be coming back to. Number 1 is, do you care about me? And number 2 is, can I make my own rules? There is so much psychology packed into those 2 questions, but let me just break it down this way. Anytime you have a leader-follower dynamic in any capacity, whether it is a teacher with students in the classroom, an administrator with teachers, a coach with athletes, a boss with employees, a mom with kids at home, a dad with kids at home, anytime there's a designated leader and a designated follower, for the follower, following is about surrendering control. So you want to lead me, leader, I've got to surrender control to you to let you do that. And that could be a very scary request, especially for some of the kids that we work with that come from traumatic backgrounds, right? So listen, leader, before I give you this precious jewel called control of my life, I need to know 2 things about you. Number 1, do you care about me? Why would I ever surrender control to anybody that I didn't believe absolutely cared about me? It's not going to happen. Number 1, and then number 2, even after I know that you care about me, am I going to make the rules, or are you going to make the rules? Meaning, once you start leading, are you strong enough and competent enough as a leader to get me where you say you're going to take me? Or can I rise up and throw you off your game? So the first question is about love, and the second question is about respect. And where you have no love and where you have no respect, you have no surrender of control. It's just that simple, right? So I'm going to be coming back to these 2 questions as I talk through them. I want you to do something for me. Everybody close your eyes. Before I introduce this first kid, close your eyes, and I want you to think about the kid that's wearing you out right now, right? I want you to think about the kid that's making you sit out in the parking lot wondering whether you really want to walk into the building. The kid that makes you think maybe I should go sell real estate. The kid that's giving you the hardest run you ever had, that you think if I could pick one kid and get him off my plate or her off, it would be that one, right? You may have 38 candidates that are all qualified. Just pick the one, right? Just pick the one. Put a sticky note on that kid. We're going to come back to that kid later. Let me tell you about my first kid. He's a 6th grader, Latino, comes from a low socioeconomic home, single, uninvolved parent. He's truant. He's got problems with the law. He's got mental illness, and he's using street drugs to self-medicate. Bad news with this kid, right? I mean, any one of those demographic variables is a strike against him in terms of educational outcomes. But when you load the deck like that, there's really not much hope, right? I mean, this kid's got a lot against him. And the bad news for us is that the toolkit we have to deal with his behaviors was put together in the 1950s under the Eisenhower administration, and it's called carrots and sticks. That's it. It's behavioral psychology, right? So we can offer him something really, really sweet or offer him something really, really sour and hope that our carrots and sticks are going to shape his and bring out the best version of him, right? As if. And it's not going to work. And you know it's not going to work, and I know it's not going to work, right? And we'll talk more about the next solution, SEL, later this afternoon. But it's bad news for us because we don't have a carrot that's sweet enough to get his attention. We don't have a stick that's threatening enough to scare him into compliance. And you're stuck with him, or 17 of him in your class, right? And it'll give you a run for the money, right? And if you have this kid in your classroom and he doesn't make you wonder why you're doing what you're doing and make you worn out and burned out, I would say one of two things is true of you. Either you're a superhero or you're in denial. Because this kid's a lot, right? Just admittedly. And my guess is that as I describe this kid here, he probably sounds a little bit like the young man or the young woman that I just asked you to think about. Well, this kid is not in 6th grade anymore. Of all things, this little stinker grew up and became a licensed psychologist, and that's what he looks like today. Oh, yeah, that was me. Man, look at all that hair I had back then. Beautiful. So what I want to do to encourage you is I'm going to share my story with you. The setting is the early 1980s. The location is the lower Rio Grande Valley of Texas, the very southern tip of Texas, about 30 miles away from the border of Mexico, mostly Latino, 95% Latino, mostly Spanish-speaking. There are 3,142 counties in the United States. This was the 5th poorest per capita. That's the setting. I'm walking up to school on the first day of 6th grade, and I see a teacher standing at the front door, and he's got his arms crossed, and he's got a big paddle in his back pocket. And he's got his eyes locked on me, and I knew who he was. I didn't like the guy. I never had him, but I didn't like him. His last name started with T, and we called him Mr. T, because he was like Mr. T from the A-Team, right? I pity the fool. Big bad dude, Mr. T, right? Two things we knew about Mr. T. Number one, you didn't make the rules with Mr. T. With Mr. T, they were his rules, and if you broke them, you were going to get a consequence. He didn't care who you were, how long you lived in the field, who your mom was or dad, whatever. He didn't care. If you broke a rule, you were going to get a consequence. Second thing I knew about Mr. T is that he didn't care about us. What he cared about was compliance. That's what he cared about, but he didn't care about us as students, and I knew that about him, right? Even though I'd never had him. I didn't like him. So I'm walking up to 6th grade, I see him, he sees movie lock eyes, and I'm thinking, you know what, man, I don't want to do this. Not today, not day one. So I start walking around to the back of the building. Well, he follows me. And he walks around and he comes up and he gets into my space and he holds out his hand. He says, "Stop right there, young man." He said, "Listen, I want you to know something. I know who you are. You're Lou Saenz. I know everything about you. I talked to your teachers from last year. I know you gave them a run for the money. I know you got problems with the law. I know your mom's not involved in your life. I know you're using drugs. I know you're skipping school. I know your older brother's about to drop out of high school. I know everything about you. So don't even step onto my campus, into my classroom and act like you're all that. I already know who you are. So it's over." And he said, "But I want you to understand one thing right now, young man. From the moment you step foot on my campus, my goal this year is to get you in line. I absolutely will have you in line by the end of the year. You can trust it. Your other teachers may have put up with it, but I'm not. And then he said, "In fact, young man, if you so much as even speak a word of Spanish in my classroom, me and you and this big brown paddle that I have, we're going to march down to the office and we're going to take care of business." And then he leaned over and he pointed his finger in my face and he said, "Do you understand me, young man?" And I knew right away he meant business because he was Mr. T. So I leaned right back into his face and I said, "Sí entiendo, pendejo." We got some Spanish speakers up here in Indiana. I never know. For those of you who didn't get it, I will translate that for you. It means, yes, I understand perfectly. You might want to Google that before you roll that into your conversational Spanish. Fair warning. No, but vámonos, man, it was a short honeymoon, right? He said if I spoke Spanish that there'd be consequences. They were his rules and I broke them. Well, you know what happened, man? We got locked into a pattern. Every day, that's all we did. To the office, from the office, to the... If I'd had an IEP, goal 1, Lou will go to the office, right? Goal 2, Lou will come back. Goal 3, repeat goal 1. I mean, that's all I did, right? And Mr. T always had these one-liners as we're walking down to the office. "Well, Lou, you couldn't make it through a single day, could you, Lou?" "Well, Lou, it must be your job to make my job hell, isn't it, Lou?" And it wasn't just at school, it was at home too. You know, my mom was a single-parent mom. trying to do the right thing, but just so far out of her league, like just not equipped, you know? And every day I got home, I would hear it from my mom, you know, ay, mijito, what have you done today? Ay, mijito, when will you learn? Ay, mijito, pues, ¿quién te manda? You know, why do you do these things? It was a beatdown. Well, 3 things happened that year that made my life particularly difficult. First one, long story, but 2 of my friends went to go buy some drugs. There was a shootout and my friends were murdered. Very next day, there I was back on my campus, to the office, from the office. You know, Lou, it's your job to make my job hell. Second thing that happened that was related to the first thing is that a group of young men broke into my home. They restrained me and they sexually assaulted my cousin. And for a number of reasons, I couldn't talk about it. But the very next day, there I was back on my campus, to the office, from the office. Couldn't make it through a single day, could you, Lou? Third thing that happened that year is that I was arrested for possession. I mean, I'll never forget the look on my mom's face when she walked into juvenile that time to pick me up, you know, the anger. And I could tell by the look in her eyes, she was done. So she voluntarily relinquished parental rights, and I went from down in South Texas, moved several hundred miles away, to what was then this tiny rice farming town out in the sticks outside of Houston called Katy, Texas, right? Now it's a huge community, you know, probably, I think they just opened their 9th 6A high school, but back then it was 1 elementary, 1 middle school, 1 high school. So I rolled into Katy, culture shock. You know, grew up in a place that was mostly Latino. I was the token brown boy. Nobody spoke Spanish. Nobody dressed like me. Nobody listened to my music. You know, it was just, I'd never seen so many pickup trucks in my life, right? And so, you know, I thought, I don't fit in here. I don't belong here, but I'm good because none of these kids know any of those kids back home. None of these teachers know any of those teachers back home. And the family that I live with, they love me pretty well, you know. And, man, I couldn't score a joint in Katy, Texas to save my life. There was just no dope to be found. And Lord knows I tried, right? So I did pretty well at Katy Junior High and Katy High School. But my senior year, my depression kicked back in because the family that I live with, they said, listen, son, we love you, but when you turn 18, you're on your own. It's up to you. And I was terrified, you know. I mean, I just knew that, no. Like, once you take all the structure away from me, I'm done, right? I mean, if you remove, I can't make it with all this. Because I know now, you know, looking back, like we can modify a child's environment and that can be helpful, but if the child has stuff on the inside they've never dealt with, it's just a matter of time before that stuff bubbles up, right? And back then, man, it wasn't like you said, hey, I think I'm struggling with depression. I have hopelessness and I'm not sleeping well and I don't want to be with my friends. Oh, well, let's get you evaluated. Maybe we can get you treatment. Maybe we can get you medication. And nobody talked about it back then, right? And I knew that once I left that structure, I was done. Well, sure enough, I graduated from Katy High School and the bottom fell out. I ended up in San Antonio. I was working as a dishwasher at a fast food restaurant. And I didn't own much. I remember I had a sleeping bag, a pillow, I had a suitcase with some clothes, and I had a box of journals. And that box of journals was my prized possession because I had learned that between the covers of a journal was my only safe place in the world. That was the only place I could express what I was thinking and feeling without fear. So all the way back in 6th grade, I'd sort of learned to use journaling as a therapy tool on my own. So that was my life. I'm 19 years old. I'm living in San Antonio, working as a dishwasher, incredibly depressed, right? And I remember coming home from work one morning. I was living in this little shack behind a house, and I was really depressed. It was about 3 a.m., and I'd closed the restaurant, and I thought, I need to write. I just need to get some thoughts out. And so I got in, I laid out my sleeping bag, and reached into my journal box. And as I reached into my journal box, I saw these 2 pieces of paper. And I was kind of confused. I didn't know what it was. And I pulled them out, and I was absolutely blown away at what I found. They were letters that had been written to me by 2 of my teachers my senior year at Katy High School, and I had completely forgotten about it. One was written to me by my English teacher. Her name was Joella Exley, and the other was written to me by my creative writing teacher. Her name was Polly McRoberts. And this is part of what one of those letters said from Miss Exley. You're extremely talented and intelligent, but most importantly, you have a good heart. I know you will use your talents to help your fellow man, and that's the most satisfying life a person can have. It said some other things, but that's really what jumped out. I put that away, and then I pull out the second letter. This is part of what it said. Don't quit writing, especially in your journal. Someday may be the basis for your book. You have insight, sensitivity, intelligence, and maturity beyond your tender years. Keep being you. You're a special person. And those words absolutely destroyed me. Because I thought, hold on. I know who I am. I'm Lou Saenz. I'm a 19-year-old version of that 6th grade kid that's never going to make it through a single day. whose job it is to make your life hell, who's never going to learn. I'm working as a dishwasher. I'm sleeping on a floor. I've got nothing. I've got no one, right? I've got no hope. I've got no future. I've got no money. I've got no education. I've got nothing, right? But here's what I do have. I have panic attacks. I have a pervasive feeling of unhappiness and sadness. I have feelings of hopelessness about the future. You know, I have racing thoughts. I can't sleep at night, right? I'm struggling to be around people. I have all of that. And I have a big fat bag of dope that might help me get through this day. That's what I have. That's what I have, right? And I wasn't suicidal at that point, but I remember thinking, like, are you kidding me? I'm 19 years old and I've got another 60 years of this to put up with? What's the point? I know who I am. But here were these two women for whom I had tremendous respect that were disagreeing with me. And because of who they were and the way they lived their lives in front of us, not as teachers, but as human beings, I couldn't just blow them off. I couldn't just say, oh, that's very sweet of you, very kind, but you're wrong. I had you fooled. I'm right. I couldn't blow it because I knew they wouldn't have written those words if they didn't absolutely believe it. So back and forth I went, you know, who's right about me? I think I know who I am, but here are these two women saying something different. It tortured me. So finally I said, this is ridiculous. Here's the deal. I'm going to make a test. I know I'm going to fail this test. And once I fail this test, that's all the proof I need to put this thing to rest. Here's the test. I'm going to try to get into college. I have no idea how you do that. I can't pay for it. Neither of my parents went to college. I don't know what that's like. But let me just try that. And when I fail, then I can say to them, hey, you know what? Very sweet, but no, you were wrong and I was right. So I got on a bus, and my first experience on a college campus at the University of Texas at San Antonio, when I stepped off the bus, was a panic attack. You don't belong here. You're not college material. You can't afford this. You're never going to pay for it. You're not smart enough. Brown kids don't get college. Who do you know that has a college degree? You're not going to make it. On, and my thoughts are racing, and I struggled to catch my breath, and I just walked up to the first guy I saw. I said, are you a student? Yep. I said, man, how do you get in? How do you do this? Go to that building over there and talk to these people. Long story short, I met some amazing people there at UTSA that just case managed me through every step of the way. We'll get you transcripts from Katy High School. You need to take the ACT. You need to take the SAT. You need to do on, and they did everything, right? So, okay. So did everything. And then about 6 months later, I was washing dishes. The manager comes in and says, hey, you got a letter from UTSA. I said, what's UTSA? The University of Texas, San Antonio, dummy, right? Oh, that UTS. Okay, great. So I'm thinking, okay, well, here's my flush letter, and these are the results I've been waiting for. Open it up. Congratulations, you've been admitted, right? And I'm thinking, oh, I'm getting punked, right? Really? Now, granted, it was the most provisional status that any human being could ever be accepted to college, but I was in, right? So the first course I had to take was an introduction to English. And I thought, great, if I have any hope of passing a college course, it's got to be that. English was always my favorite subject. So I took that course, and at the end of the semester, not only did I pass, I made an A. And I started thinking, are you kidding me? I think I just earned my first college credit. And for the first time in my life, I gave myself permission not to believe what Miss McRoberts and Miss Exley said, but just to consider it. Maybe they were right. Maybe they were right. On the one hand. On the other hand, this could have been a clerical error for all you know, right? You should probably take another course. So I took another one that spring just to get a second data point so I could draw my regression line, right? I passed it. I passed the second, and then I took another course that summer, and then just kept going back a little at a time, thinking like, I'll do it this semester, but this is going to be the semester I fail out, right? This is going to be, it all falls apart, right? And I just kept doing that. Well, just before I turned 27 years old, I graduated with my undergraduate degree in English. Never, 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 never thought I was going to get a college degree. Never thought I was college material, but here I was in my late 20s with a college degree, and finally, I gave myself permission to believe them. Finally, I gave myself permission to believe that they were right and I was wrong. And so I said, you know what, man, I'm done being Lou. I'm done being that kid whose job it is to make your life hell, who's never going to learn, who can't make it through a single day. And then just psychologically, as a way to give myself permission to be somebody else, I said, I'm going to start going by my first name. My name is Adam Lewis Saenz, Adam L. Saenz, and I had always been Lou all my life. And I said, man, I'm going to be Adam from now on. Maybe Adam can live into a different, maybe Adam can be somebody different. So then I had my undergraduate degree. I finally got my first job working as a case manager for a foster placement agency coordinating mental health services for kids in care. And as I looked at those kids, I realized, Adam, you were that kid, and if they need therapy and they need medication, you probably still do too, because you haven't dealt with your stuff yet. So I finally got treatment, I finally went into therapy, finally got medication, started a master's degree in counseling just because I wanted to unpack my own past. And the more I went through my therapy and got healing and found freedom, the more I realized they were right, Adam. They've always been right. You were the one that was wrong. This is who you've always been. They saw something in you that you couldn't even see in yourself. So then I was doing well at that point. I said, I want to keep going. I applied to A&M and got my PhD in psychology. The last thing we have to do for our doctoral program is a year of clinical training. It's called your pre-doc internship. I applied to Harvard Medical School. I was accepted, did my major rotations at Boston Children's. And the whole thing came full circle in March of 2001, I remember. I was sitting in Logan Airport. I was waiting for my flight. I was going to fly back to College Station to defend my dissertation. I was going to graduate in May, and I had applied to postdocs at Brown, Yale, and Columbia, and Brown was my top choice because of the clinical work. So I'm sitting in Logan Airport. I'm waiting for my flight, snowing outside, and my cell phone rang, and I didn't recognize the area code. And so I answered my phone. I said, hello, this is Adam. And then a voice on the other end said, Adam, hey, this is Dr. Jay Reeve at Brown Medical School. Listen, we got your paperwork. We really enjoyed our interview with you. I'm calling to offer you a faculty appointment here at Brown to finish your postdoc. And I was thrilled, right? I mean, this is my top choice, and I'm like doing the happy dance, and he's telling me about the position, and the clinical work, and the research, on and on. Well, as he's talking, I had an incoming phone call, and I didn't recognize the area code. And I said, Dr. Reeve, I'm so sorry to ask. Do you mind if I put you on hold? I have a call coming in. I think I need to get it. He said, no problem. So I clicked over, and I said, hello, this is Adam. And then a voice on the other end of the phone said, Adam, hey, this is Dr. Chuck Saenz at Yale Medical School. Listen, we got your paperwork. We really enjoyed our interview with you, and I'm calling to offer you a faculty appointment here at Yale to finish your postdoc. And I said, bro, I got Brown on the other line. Let me call you back. Click. Switched over, took the position at Brown, right? And after I hung up, that's when it hit me. Like, it was almost literally, like my jaw was almost literally on the floor, right? Like, did I just hang up on Yale because I had Brown on the other line? Yeah. And that's when I realized, Adam, you're set, man. You can write your own ticket. You're qualified to do what you love to do, which is practice psychology at any hospital, any university, any school district in the country. And you're bilingual, for crying out loud. So you just decide where you want to go, and I bet you they'll make a place for you. And I think for anyone to have a moment where you realize your skill set is that valued, it's a landmark moment. It really is. But when you come up doing without and not having things and you have that moment, it's surreal. I mean, that's the only word I can think to describe it. It's just surreal, right? And I realized in that moment, I wouldn't have these opportunities right now if I didn't have a PhD in psychology. And I never would have had the courage to apply for a PhD if I hadn't finished my master's. Never could have applied for a master's if I hadn't finished my undergrad. And I'm here to tell you, man, I know that I know that I know that I know. I never would have stepped out to be anything other than that mistaken version of who I was had educators not spoken truth into my life. Men and women just like you who 35 years ago could have looked at that kid and said, you know what? I don't know how he got to 12th grade in that condition academically or emotionally. They could have said, you know what? They don't pay me enough to put up with a kid like that. They could have said, you know what? I didn't give birth to that kid. Don't make me parent that boy. And they would have been exactly right, man. Something fell off along the way and I got stuck in their classroom. And they weren't my mama, right? And they didn't get paid enough to put up with a kid like me. But by God's grace, man, they said, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? And they looked at me and two things were obvious. One was obvious and one was not obvious. What was obvious was the gap. Like, are you kidding me? How does he end up as a 17-year-old in my classroom in that condition? The gap was obvious. What was not obvious was the potential. And by God's grace, those women said, we're going to focus on his potential, and where there's a gap, we're going to stand in the gap for him. We're going to make sure this kid has everything he needs to be successful in life, everything we can do. And now when I think about my why as a psychologist, when I think about the women that impacted me and the educators that impacted me, you know, 35 years ago, educators said, we're going to make sure that this kid has everything he needs to be successful. And now as a psychologist, what means most to me is working with educators and saying, as a psychologist, I want to make sure that you have everything you can have to be empowered as much as possible so that you can be relationally successful with your students. That's my why. So if you ever happen to be in Katy, Texas for any reason, and you're driving down Westheimer Parkway, you're going to see this building. And that's Joella Exley Elementary. And if you ever happen to be driving down Franz Road in Katy, Texas, you're going to see that building, and that's Polly McRoberts Elementary. And I'm so proud of Katy for honoring those two women. Give me 5 more minutes, and I'm going to talk about the second kid. That was Maya Chavez. And when I look at that picture of Maya, her smile does not convince me. And when I think about this girl and what she had experienced up to that point in her life, I think, what does this kid have to smile about? She was in 4th grade. She had been in the custody of protective services for 2 years already in her young life. She had experienced things that no human being should ever have to experience, let alone a little girl. And we sit her down in front of a camera and tell her to say cheese. What's there to smile about? Well, what happens with kids that grow up in chaotic families, whether protective services is involved or not, is that they develop a base layer of emotion. And that base primal emotion for them is fear / anxiety / stress. It's all essentially the same thing, because they never know what to expect. And I'm not talking about from year to year, are we moving? I'm not talking about from month to month. I'm talking about from moment to moment. Is this going to be the moment when somebody walks into my room and touches me? Is this going to be the moment when the bullets come flying through the window? Is this going to be the moment when somebody knocks on my door and says, man, we're here to take your kids away? And when you live in that kind of high stakes unpredictability, you're always on guard. In psychology, we call it fight or flight. You're always in arousal mode, right? You're always in fight. You never get to rest or digest. It's always fight or flight. And that part of your nervous system is all hyperactivated. And what street smart kids figure out real quick is that when you're afraid, the flight option in fight or flight is never the right answer. You never run. You always fight. It's better to fight and lose than it is to run, because if I can fight you and beat you, I can establish dominance, and that will let me feel safe. That's how I find my peace, is by conquering you. And those are the kids. And what happens is, if they're in that environment long enough neurochemically, in that stress bath, neurochemical bath long enough, their hardwiring gets shifted, and they go straight from fear to anger and aggression. Because again, they learn to use anger as a tool to establish safety. And these are the kids we have in our classrooms that go from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds, right? And we say, what happened? They would never admit this, but what happened? Ultimately, something scared them, and it triggered them into anger, and they went off, right? So what happens is that if the parents aren't doing what they need to be doing to keep the kids safe, protective services will get involved and move them and put them in foster care. And we, in our adult rational minds, think, great, at least they're in a safe place now. Sorta. But what that kid is thinking is, you know what, that family may have been crazy that they took me from, but they were my crazy, and I don't have them anymore. So then you add to that first layer of emotion, that deep bath of anxiety and fear, a second layer, and that sadness and grieving, because they're grieving the loss of their biological family, and they know there's no going back. And what those kids know about that building called school and the adults in that building is that building and those adults are the safest, most predictable part of their world. And if they're going to act out those feelings of sadness, of fear, of rage, of anger, of loss, of grieving, they know that building and those adults are the safest place to do it. And while that makes our calling incredibly demanding at times, right, when we're doing our thing, in some ways it's a badge of honor when a kid is acting out, because they're saying, you're safe and I can get this out with you. Well, then what happens, statistically speaking, if a child has not been adopted by the time they're 10, 11, 12 years old, nationally, the likelihood that they will ever be adopted, it drops dramatically, right? So then these kids enter junior high, they haven't been adopted, and you add on to the first layer of emotion, the fear, the stress, anxiety, second is sadness and grieving, and now there's a third layer, and that's hopelessness. I'm stuck in the system. The ship sailed and I wasn't on it. I'm not going to get adopted, and I'm going to age out. And when I turn 18, I'm going to take a PALS class. The state's going to give me a check for $1,500 and say, good luck, God bless. And that's it. And associated with those feelings of hopelessness are peripheral thoughts. I'm damaged goods. I'm broken. I'm unlovable. I'll never measure up. I won't be good enough. All of that is part of their life. By now, they're adolescents, and they're acting out not just where it's safe in schools. Now they start acting out where it's not safe, out in the streets. So you have a history of interaction with the legal system. You have ankle monitors, probation officers, all of that mess, right? And if you ever have a family that's even thinking about adopting a child with those kinds of special needs, the state will say, listen, family, before you sign up for this, you need to know what you're getting in for. This is not going to be a bait and switch. And that family will sit down at some state office somewhere and read stacks and stacks of papers, a list of office referrals, behavior reports, inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment, a list of psychologicals, a list of diagnoses, a list of medications, all of this, right? And who's going to want to sign up for that, for crying out loud? And that's the life that Maya was living. When she was 10 years old, like many children in her situation, she ended up in Judge Cindy Miller's court in Bryan, Texas. She stood in front of Judge Miller. Judge Miller slammed her gavel and changed her life forever. But for Maya, the circumstances were a little bit different. because a family read her file. And they said, we know exactly what we're signing up for. And on that day in March of 2010, Judge Miller slammed her gavel and made it official. And that was the day that my wife and I adopted Maya. And Maya Chavez became Maya Saenz. And there we are with our biological kids and the judge on our adoption day. That was such a great day for us. That was on a Tuesday. That very next Saturday, Maya and I had our very first daddy-daughter dance. Yeah, there we are for the daddy-daughter dance. She was so cute. I remember I said, all right, sweet girl, you've got a new dress, you've got new shoes, you are beautiful. I said, you know what, before we go to the dance, I'm going to take you out to eat dinner anywhere that you want to go. And man, her little eyes, she said, are you kidding me? Anywhere? I said, anywhere you want to go, you name it. Steak, seafood, lobster, I don't care, you call it. Chick-fil-A? Chick-fil-A. So we had a chicken sandwich and waffle fries in our formal wear. It was the bomb. So after dinner, we got to the dance, and we were still getting to know each other. You know, she hadn't been with us that long. And we were still, and all day long I was thinking, like, whenever we get to the dance, I just want to make a point of connecting. I want to make a point of connecting, right? So we got to the dance, we got some punch, we settled into our table, and I remember I reached out and I held her hand, and I took this little picture. And I said, sweet girl, let's talk for a minute. There are two things we need to discuss. I said, number one, you have a job. Number two, I have a job. Let's talk about your job. And I said, sweet girl, your job is to follow the rules. You don't make the rules in our family, Mom and I do. There's not a question mark at the end of that statement. There's not a comma. There's a period. We make the rules, you don't. You follow them. That's your job. And I said, my hope is that by the time you're 18, you've earned enough of my trust that you're making your own rules. But for right now, you're 10, you haven't earned any of my trust, and you don't make the rules, we do. You follow them. Do you understand? And she said, yes, sir, I do. And I said, great. And I said, here's the second thing we need to talk about. And I said, sweetheart, I have a job. Do you know what my job is? And she said, yes, sir, your job is to make sure that I follow the rules. And I smiled at her, and I said, oh, no, sweet girl. I said, I want you to look at my eyes when I tell you this, because this is one of the most important things I will ever say to you. And I said, sweet girl, my job is to lay my life down for you. My job is to love you and protect you and provide for you and to comfort you. It's still so hard for me to talk about all these years later. I said, sweetheart, you don't understand this about yourself yet, but you're the most precious thing on the planet. There is no pile of gold anywhere more valuable than you, not even in the same category. And my job is to lay my life down for you so that you will understand your value. Because once you understand your value, you will live as though your choices matter. Once you understand your value, you will realize that you weren't a mistake. You will realize that just like me, you have a calling, you have a purpose, you have a destiny. You're here for a reason. And I said, sweet girl, listen, I understand something. You're going to push us and test us. Do they really mean it when they say they make the rules and I don't? You're going to push us and you're going to test us. Do they really mean it when they say they love me? And I said, I'm not going to like that. It's going to frustrate me and it's going to make me angry, but I want you to understand one thing right now. There is nothing you can ever do that will ever separate you from my love for you. I will always be your dad and you will always be my girl. Nothing will change that. And then I remember I told her, I said, listen, my trust, I don't give that away. You have to earn that. And I said, but my love is a gift. All you have to do is receive it. And then in a moment of incredible clarity, she looked at me and she said, Dad, I don't think I've ever been loved that way before. And I smiled at her and I said, oh, sweetheart, believe it or not, I know exactly how you feel. I said, let me tell you a story about a kid I used to know. His name was Lou. And I shared my story with her just as I shared it with you. And as I shared my story with her, I think this peace came over her because she realized this guy might work out after all right? And let me just say this very quickly, because I know there's a lot of SPED people in the house. I've been SPED since 2000 when I started my career, and my wife and I. And man, I'm just so ashamed to admit that we came home from many IEP meetings at the end of the day, saying bad things about parents. Like, well, no wonder that kid's crazy. Look at the parents. Man, I don't want to deal with that, Mom. I don't want to deal with that, Dad. And I'll tell you what, man, I'm a licensed psychologist. My wife's an occupational therapist. But until we adopted a child with special needs, you have no clue. You just have no clue what it's like. It's one thing to work on a campus from 9 to 5, but you go home and you live your life. But when you're parenting that, it's in your living room, it's in your bedroom. Her reactive attachment disorder didn't care about my PhD or where I keynoted yesterday, right? And you never get away, and you go, you say, well, I'm gonna go on vacation. Well, guess what goes with you? And I'm just ashamed to admit that I was so judgmental to so many parents that are trying so hard to do right by their kids. But I was so clueless, man. I just had no clue, so self-righteous. So I'm not saying that you need to have children with special needs to appreciate it, but if you don't and you feel frustrated, just remember the parents are walking a journey as well, and it's not an easy one. So the reason I share my daughter as a case study is that, and then I just want to encourage you and remind you that what you're doing matters. What you do matters. My life is living proof that you're shaping the future, literally. I mean, when I think about the men and women that poured into my life, 35 years ago, when quite frankly, I was not the best version of myself, how do I look at a girl like that and not bring her into my heart? That's the generational power that we have. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing, right? So my wife and I have been married, we celebrate our 25th anniversary this year, as a matter of fact. I want to share some pictures with you. That's what my kids look like in 2003. Oh, they're so cute. There's my daughter Elisa on the left, my son Isaiah in the middle, and there's Andrew on the right. So my kids look like in 2009. There's Isaiah on the left, Elisa in the middle, and there's Andrew. And this is what my kids look like in 2011. There's Elisa on top, Isaiah. There's Andrew on the bottom, and there's my daughter Maya. This was about 2015. There we are on the campus at Texas A&M. And this was Thanksgiving. And we are blessed. So here's what I want to do to conclude. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. And as we finish, I want you to think about that kid that's wearing you out. Hey, listen, I don't judge you for not liking that kid. I don't blame you for not liking. I get it, man. I'd be worried about you if you weren't a little frustrated, right? I get it. But just close your eyes, think about that kid, and let me speak to you on behalf of that child. Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Thank you for coming to work today. I don't know where I'll end up when I'm 19. I may be earning academic honors at an Ivy League university. I may be serving my country in the military. I may be an employed high school graduate. I may be in jail. I may not even make it to 19. Only God knows. But regardless of where I might be and what I might be doing at 19, our interaction, you the educator and me the student, it shapes me. You need to know that even though the school building may sometimes seem like a zoo to you, in some very important ways, this school building can be the safest place on the planet for me. You need to know that when you teach me, even at your worst, you have the potential to be a better influence on me than much of what and who I experience off this campus. You need to know that when you love me, even at your worst, you have the potential to love me more sincerely and effectively than many people I'm around away from this campus. The state may give me a test once a year that may measure some of what you've taught me, but I guarantee you, life gives me a test every day that measures all of what you've taught me. So thank you for teaching me, especially in those moments when every part of my being is communicating I don't want to be taught by you. And thank you for loving me, especially in those moments when every part of my being is communicating that I don't want to be loved by you. Bottom line, I need you. I need to know you care about me, and I need to know that I don't make the rules. And I may never be fortunate enough to appreciate that and express that or even realize that. But I hope you're courageous enough never to forget. So thank you for coming to work today, sir. Thank you for coming to work today, ma'am. Please take care of yourself. Please be well. And please come back tomorrow. You went into education to make a difference. And man, I'm here to tell you, you were not wrong. Be encouraged. Be encouraged and know that my life is living proof that what you do matters. When these little kids that are showing up in our hallways and running around in our playgrounds and on our courts, on our fields, and 30 years from now when it's their world and they're running the show and they sit down over coffee or a beer and they talk about who the game changers were, your names are going to come up. Your names are going to come up as being the major players in their life. Be encouraged. What you do matters. I'm going to end with that question my mom asked me in juvenile. What are you doing here? Right? Put that on a sticky note. And reflect on your calling. What am I doing here? Have I really nailed my why? And keep that with you because you need it. And I'll answer the same question. What am I doing here? You know what, man? By God's grace, I know who I am today. My name is Dr. Adam Lewis Saenz, and I'm here today because my life was impacted by the power of a teacher. Thank you so much. I can't wait to be with you this afternoon and tomorrow. God bless you. Have a great, great rest of the day.